see his majesty. I close my eyes and feel his love for me. Because I trust in thee, O cause thou me to hear thy loving kindness free when morning doth.
Nothing? Thank you. I am here, right? You guys can see me? You can hear me? Okay. We're missing a lot of people today. I can't tell you who they are, but I know there's a lot of openings that I don't think are usually openings. Like anyone on this side. Sorry, guys. Like, just hold down that side. Lots of comments from the right. And we have one on the left. Yeah, not many. Okay. So we are in lesson 3. We're going to start off in 2 Samuel 5, I believe. We probably will be jumping back and forth between 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles because there's a lot of same story, more details in Chronicles than necessarily in Samuel. All right, last time we did chapters 3 and 4, most of chapter 3 and 4. We saw David's establishment as king in Hebron. We discussed Joab's murder and whether or not it was lawful of murder of Abner, not his murder. He didn't get murdered till much later. But whether or not that murder was a lawful one, and I kind of liked the discussion because I think at the end of it we were like, maybe? And I feel like that is exactly the situation that they would have faced. You have a random guy killed in a random place without a lot of details. Is he right? Is he not? What are we going to do? Well, he didn't even wait to find out what the people were going to do. So he moved forward from there. So we saw that established. We saw Ishbosheth get murdered very quickly at the end of our lesson last week. So David now is king of Judah. There is no king of Israel. And he's going to be king of Judah for a little while there's no king of Israel because Ishbosheth only reigns 2 years. And it's pretty clear David is king of Judah in Hebron, and then he's king over all Israel and Judah in Jerusalem. And so that's the way the text reads it. So that's the way that I'm talking about it. So we got about a 5-year difference between the death of Ishbosheth and the full establishment of David as king. Okay. Let's get into chapter 5. We're going to read a lot of it, as much as we can, but probably not all of what lesson 3 covers, because it's like 5 chapters equivalent, and we just can't read everything. But we can get started in chapter 5. Anybody have any comments before we get going? Cool. Okay. All the tribes of Israel gathered together at Hebron to David. They say, because we are bone and flesh. In times past when Saul was king over us, it was you who led out and brought in Israel. And the Lord said to you, you shall be shepherd of my people Israel. You shall be prince over Israel. So all the elders of Israel came to the king at Hebron, and King David made a covenant with them at Hebron before the Lord. They anointed David king over Israel, and David was 30 years old when he began to reign. He reigns for 40 years. At Hebron, he reigned over Judah 7 years and 6 months, and at Jerusalem, he reigned over all Israel and Judah 33 years. Okay, so there's our introduction and kind of overview of what's going to happen here. All of the tribes of Israel come to David. They make that statement of servitude to him, that you were the one who was chosen. Even when Saul was king, you're really the guy. Saul didn't lead us, you did. We're going to see that pattern come back up. Pay attention to that, because much later in 2 Samuel, David stops going out with the army and his life falls apart. Kings need to go with the army. Like, that's a great lesson from Saul and David. Kings need to be in the battlefield. They need to be amongst their people. They need to be working. When they stay in their palace and they just stay there and they try to just rule from their palace, it doesn't end well for any of those kings, including Solomon, Rehoboam. Like, how far down the line do we want to go? It doesn't end well. They do much better when they go in the field. Okay, anybody have any comments on any of this? So, David has a problem. Ironically, it's a similar problem to what the United States had when we first became a country, and that is, where is the capital going to be? Which state gets to claim it, right? And then that state is more glorified than anybody else. That's the problem, right? So what state is Washington, D.C. a part of? Yeah, used to be Virginia. They took it out, right? And that's the reason. Well, one of the reasons, probably. I'm sure they had a whole bunch, probably wrote like a 200-page pamphlet, because it's government. But that's what David's problem now is he has to find a capital city that, one, does not link him strongly to Judah. We have already seen the fracturing of Israel. They're already making a difference between Judah and Israel. They're already making a difference even between Judah, Benjamin, and Israel. So we're already fracturing. So he has to find a way to bring them together. And the way that he does that is he finds a city of the Jebusites. And that is Jerusalem. Jerusalem at this point is not owned by any Israelites. The Jebusites have maintained it. If you go back and you look in Joshua, they get to the city of the Jebusites and they said it's too strong, we can't take it, so they don't. So for all of the period of the Judges and Saul, it's owned by a foreign people. It is not really a part of Israel, even though they probably on paper would have claimed it as a part of Israel because it was given to them by God. They don't own it. So he is now going to own it. We also get this lovely little back and forth going on between Jerusalem and David. What is Jerusalem? What are the Jebusites saying to David?
Beat you back with the blind and the lame.
Yeah, we don't need to get the good guys out. The blind and the lame can take you. And David takes offense. Very much takes offense. So what's his plan? Yeah.
Whoever goes up first, they could be over the army.
Exactly. So if you look in Chronicles, I don't remember which one it was, 14 or so. I don't think it was in the first section. I think it was in the second section. We have the war of the Jebusites. So we can go ahead and turn over there. We get a little more details from 1 Chronicles than we do out of 2 Samuel here. 2 Samuel is a little bit more matter of fact. So 2 Chronicles, I think it's the 14 one. I'll check when I get there. That's the Philistines. (11). I had my Bible over too far. I didn't see that one. It's 1 Chronicles 11 is the taking of Jerusalem. He makes this agreement. He says, whoever can strike down the Jebusites first will be chief and commander. Who's the one, of course, who does it? You can't get away from the guy. Like, he is really good at warfare. All over the place. He wins. You put Joab on the battlefield, you just win. And here we have it again. Joab is the one that is going to be first inside the city, and he is going to stay first as chief and commander of the combined army of Israel throughout the life of David and until Solomon has him killed and replaces him. Any questions on that? Okay. How do they get in the city? Yeah, they go up through where the water comes in. So, let's see if Chronicles has that in here. I don't think Chronicles gives us that detail. Samuel's the one that gives us that detail. But they go in through the water gate. So there's been some attempts to try to identify what the water gate is. You have a little map in your lesson book on page 13. And it identifies something called the Gihon Spring, and then there's this dashed line that comes inside the city. That dashed line is called Warren's Shaft. Very exciting. And it was discovered by a British explorer named Warren. That's why it's called Warren's Shaft. Lately, in the rest of the 20th century, there's been some debate on that, whether or not it really existed long enough ago, or if it came in a little bit after, once David has established. There's been some discussion about that. There is an older water shaft that was made by seemingly the Jebusites. It would have been the right time period. Joab may have used that one. It was a much longer shaft. I don't know. So there's a couple of options there. The other one runs right next to Jerusalem there, from Gihon Spring down through the Kidron Valley. So we're still talking about similar issues here. It just may have been they got to the Gihon Spring and could get in pretty easy because that was walled off, or it may have been that they got to the Gihon Spring and had to go through Warren's Shaft in order to get in. I don't know. But the point is he had to crawl, creep along. We're not talking about, what is it, Hezekiah's tunnel, where it's nice and wide and you can walk through it even still today. We're not talking about something that large. We're talking about crawling through like a cave and getting inside. So he's probably not taking a lot of weaponry. Certainly he could not take a shield with him. He'd have been lucky enough to get a sword or something of that kind through, probably not even a spear. So the point is brave. He is going into a fully armed enemy city that was too strong for anyone before them to take, with very little armament, and wins. Seemingly he takes some people, gets the gates open, and they move from there. Anybody have any comments on any of that?
And his, I believe, his armor bearer, where they go up through the crevice and attack the Philistines.
Yes. Good parallel. Good parallel there. There's a lot of parallel stories. David and Saul, David and Solomon, we see a lot of parallels. Okay, anybody else have any comments? Yes.
We were talking last week about how little territory Saul controlled, and I was reading, about Saul, and he was constantly besieged with warfare all around, and that would weaken and keep him from establishing. And you can see God's hand in that. We're going to make you a king, but then I'm going to, pick at you from 1,000 directions and sort of just keep you. You'll never accomplish the things that you should. And it's not that way with David. God is with him, and he's able to defeat all of his enemies and establish the larger kingdom.
Yeah, one of the reasons David's kingdom works so well is because he spends the years Saul is chasing him. He spends those years clearing out all of the south, destroying all of those enemy cities. Yeah, you're exactly right. But Saul doesn't reap the benefit. David does. Yeah.
In the 2 Samuel account in verse 7, that's the first use of Zion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's somewhat anachronistic to call it Zion within the context of taking the city of Jebusites, because it hasn't become Zion yet, as we would think of it, but that's the first use of it.
Yeah, using the modern name for the writer. Yes, the writer's modern name for that region. Yeah, we're going to see that several times actually through today's lesson, where he uses the name of the location of where they went to tell the story of why it's called that. So it wasn't called that when they went there, but now it is. Yeah. Any other thoughts on the taking of Jerusalem? Okay. So at this point, yes.
At this time, do we know how many wives and concubines he has?
We know he has several wives because of being in Hebron. He has at least 3. It says later in verse 13 of 2 Samuel 5 that he is going to take more concubines and wives, and then we're going to get a list of his sons that are born in Jerusalem compared to the list of sons that are born in Hebron. How many? We're not given a full number. But probably Solomon learned how to make alliances by wives and concubines from his father. More than likely. Solomon's going to take it way too far. Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts? Cool. Okay. Let's see what else we got here in 2 Samuel. So 2 Samuel moves us then into the defeat of the Philistines. If I remember right, Chronicles starts the discussion of the ark, moves to the fighting of the Philistines, and then finishes the discussion of the ark. So the order of these events is probably not all that important. They're happening all about the same time. We've got the Philistines invading, testing this brand new king, and then we've got David wanting to move the ark. So we'll use Samuel's account and start with the Philistines and move to the ark, because I think from the writer of 2 Samuel's perspective, he pacifies the land, then he worships God. So makes the land safe, then moves God's instrument. Whereas Chronicles makes the point that he tries to move God's instrument, fails, pacifies the land, and then he goes and he does it correctly. So just to kind of get the comparison between the two. All right. The moving of the ark, I think we will read from Chronicles. I think it's a little bit more detailed than the account in 2 Samuel. So if you want to turn back over to Chronicles. Yeah.
2 Samuel 5 and verse 24. What's David hearing in the tops of the trees? You know, it's because it reads as if there might be something supernatural going on there.
Oh, yeah. I think you're exactly right. Hearing something going on in the trees, yes. There very much is something going on there. And I think God's making that point. You went to the back. I struck the army. Where is the army now going to be running? They're going to be running to the back. So he is getting the stragglers. God already started the fight. Yeah. Trying to really hammer home, David's not winning these fights. God is winning the fights. But I think you're exactly right. And we see that a couple of times. I think there's at least one more king. I don't remember if it's in 1 Kings or 2 Kings that's going to have that, where it sounds like chariots going through the tops of the trees. We're going to see that again as well. Yeah.
Verse 10 of chapter 5 will explain what you're seeing in where he's hearing that sound. And David became greater and greater, and the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. If I'm not mistaken, isn't that like militaristic terminology?
Yeah.
To say God of the army of heaven or the host of heaven. So it shouldn't surprise us then that just a few verses later, he hears the army that God's commanding on his behalf.
Yeah, you're exactly right. All right, let's take a look at 1 Chronicles 14. Let's talk about that fight. So, David is making a name for himself as king over all of Israel. As a result of this, the Philistines are not pleased. In verse 8 of chapter 14 of 1 Chronicles, the Philistines hear that David had been anointed king over all Israel. All of the Philistines go up to search for David, and they begin to make a raid. They make a raid in the valley of Rephaim, which is up in this middle region right here, around just to the right of Gezer, this region down here that's kind of open on this map. I was bemoaning the fact that they don't make good maps. Write your congressman. Tennessee needs to sponsor the making of really good biblical maps. I think that's fair. King James could get a Bible. Tennessee can do maps. Okay. Thank you very much. Write your congressman. So they come into that region. Notice what they're encroaching upon, though. They're encroaching upon Benjamin, because that's the Benjamin region here. They're not really coming down into Judah, but they are getting right on the doorstep of this brand new city. Jerusalem has just been taken. They probably don't have it fully occupied at this point. Like, they haven't moved in normal people. They're still organizing things. They're still getting it set. And so it is very vulnerable. And so all of the Philistines come up, and pretty well the only thing that's going to be inside of Jerusalem is the army, and then David's going to take it out of the city. How does David decide he needs to go out and fight the Philistines?
He inquires of the Lord.
He inquires of the Lord. We don't get those details with Jerusalem. I think it's likely he inquired of the Lord for Jerusalem as well, but we're not told that. We're just told that he gets insulted and he goes off and he does it. This time he is asking. And I think one of the differences is you've got Hebron firmly established. He's king there. It's occupied. There's going to be guards remaining. And then you have Jerusalem, who's newly taken. They've really only got the army. They haven't moved the families in. There's not a lot there. They're not really firmly established. And so he needs to know, if I leave this city behind, am I going to get to come back to it? Or are the Philistines going to defeat me in the field? They're going to take my brand new city, and I'm going to be put to shame. So he asks God, and God says, yeah, go down there. I'm going to give them into your hand. He goes down there to Baal Perazim, which we're going to get told why that's called Baal Perazim during this very story. He strikes them down, and David says, God has broken through my enemies by my hand like a bursting flood. So Baal Perazim means Lord of breaking through. It's one of the only times in Scripture that we see Baal used to describe God correctly, because that's all it is the word Lord. But we usually associate it with the god Baal.
Baal also refers to water. So Perazim, just like Perez,
A breach.
So it's bursting through like water, breaking through. I think that's more than talking about God.
Yeah. Okay, that could be too. Yeah, I like that. Any other thoughts? Cool. Okay, let's go a little further. The Philistines are not necessarily done. The end of that story of verse 12 is that they left their gods behind. What does David do with the gods? He burns them. They're probably valuable, but he burns them. Contrast this to going back to 1 Samuel, and the sons of Eli take the Ark of the Covenant onto the battlefield. The Israelites lose. They leave the ark behind. What do the Philistines do with the ark? Yeah, they put it in the house of Dagon, and that doesn't go so well. David has no willingness to bring idols into his city. He purges them entirely by burning them with fire. None of them are coming in to his city. It's a big difference here. We're going to see later on, probably during, I think, the next teacher's quarter, and then definitely the teachers after that's quarter, that this is not going to be true of all of the kings. Several of the kings are going to not only bring idols into the city of Jerusalem, but they're going to make room in the temple for these idols, moving aside various things of God's to make room for these idols inside of the temple and the temple grounds. So, contrast to David again. Any comments before we talk about the next fight with the Philistines? Okay, this is the one we were referencing just a moment ago. The Philistines come back into the valley. David inquires of the Lord. God says, don't go against them. Go around them opposite the balsam trees and come in from behind, and I will go before you. When you hear the sound marching through the tops of the balsam trees, go out to battle. God has gone out to strike down the army of the Philistines, and that's exactly what happens. David then strikes them from Gibeon to Gezer, and the fame of David goes out into all the lands. So, we're talking about Gibeon, which is right in that region, all the way over to Gezer, which is a farther region than when Saul strikes the Philistines for his first battle with them. He doesn't strike them nearly as far. Any thoughts? So, immediate region is pacified. This is what we're seeing is very different than Saul. Andy's point just a little bit ago. Or, no, Blaine's, I don't know, one of you. One of you made the point. I only remember what I say. I don't remember what you guys say. One of you made the point that Saul is besieged from all around. I think it was over here, now that I'm thinking about it. I was looking this way. Saul gets besieged from all around, and he never really gets to grow. David's, on the other hand, growing outward. The Philistines are losing. The Jebusites are losing. We're going to see more and more and more nations losing to him, and his reach is going to grow larger and larger and larger. He already controls Judah because he dealt with that during the reign of Saul. That's already done. Now the Philistines are trying to contest him for Benjamin, and he's defeated them there, driven them back to their cities. They're not inside of his region. We're going to see him push more north, but ultimately even David is going to focus very strongly on the south. Solomon almost entirely on the south. Any thoughts anybody has?
In Chronicles, verse 17 and chapter 14 there, where it says the Lord brought the fear of David upon all the nations, and you get this picture of going back to Moses and Joshua, and the people hearing what had happened in Egypt and then what had happened in Jericho, and it's like now the Israelites are back.
Yeah. And they're probably telling those stories. These are the same people that parted the sea. These are the same people that wandered in the wilderness and didn't die. They're probably telling those stories again. Jericho. Yeah.
Even when David was on the run from Saul and he was kind of hanging out with the Philistines, he was raiding inside of Judah, but he was attacking the previous inhabitants of the land, kind of cleaning it out like they were supposed to do originally. So when he becomes king, even in Hebron, it's already a lot cleaner than it was before.
Yes. That's why we don't see him have to pacify Hebron or Judah. He just has to pacify the north and the west. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Cool. Okay, I think that just leaves us the ark. So we'll go ahead and use Chronicles because Chronicles is a lot larger in its discussion of the ark. And so we'll start off in chapter, 13? And then we'll go over again into chapter 15 if we have time. So in Chronicles, we get a little more detail. Samuel just says he gathers all of the chosen men together and he makes a decree. Chronicles, it's a consultation that goes on here. So David consults with the commanders of the thousands and the hundreds, with every leader. He says to the assembly of Israel, if it seems good to you and from the Lord our God, let us send abroad to our brothers who remain in all the lands of Israel, as well as the priests and the Levites and in the cities that have pasture land, that they may be gathered to us. Let us then bring the ark of our God to us, for we did not seek it in the days of Saul. All the assembly agreed to do so, for the thing was right in the eyes of all the people. Okay. So this is what we're talking about going on here. The ark needs to move. Where has it been? Yeah, Kiriath Jearim. So one of the reasons I like Chronicles' account, it's a little bit of a different name in Second Samuel. What does he call it? Baal Judah. Yeah, that's not a name we recognize. Kiriath Jearim, we all know Kiriath Jearim. That's the name that we recognize. So that's the one that I'm going to go with. Kiriath Jearim, again, I hate the maps, is up here in the north, right about in that region area, maybe a little higher. So this is the region it has to cross. What was just going on in that region? A lot of war with the Philistines. That's why I tend to take the view that the Philistine fight happens before the ark. He pacifies the land so that God's ark can move safely. We're not going to have a repeat of what happened the last time. So David gathers everybody together. They gather together, and I love the way verse 5 says it. They gather from the Nile of Egypt to Lebo Hamath to bring the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. From the very bottom to the very top, they gather everybody together. This is really the first time there's been enough safety to gather everybody together like this. So he is really firmly establishing, not only is he is king of peace in the land of Israel, which is ironic because he's going to be known as a man of war. But this world is now peaceful enough that you can leave your farm behind and you can come down here to Jerusalem several days, maybe a week or two out of your time that you're going to be gone from your home. You're going to be here before finally you get to go home. That's a lot of trust. That you can leave your things behind and everything's going to be okay. Any comments on any of that before we go a little further? Cool. Did you have a comment or just thinking about it? You can just think about it. I'm okay. Okay, what is David's plan for moving the ark? It's true, but he doesn't have that plan for 2 more chapters. He's going to have that plan. When your mom hits you upside the head and tells you to straighten up, then you have the right plan. What's his wrong plan? Put it on a cart. Yeah. Okay. Probably we're not talking about this run-down, rickety old cart. More than likely it's a very nice cart, because after all, if you're putting the symbol of your God upon it, you're going to make it nice. He's king. He's not just this backwater guy anymore. But it is still a cart. It's still wrong, going back to Lee's comment. Yes? Probably the sons of Abinadab, which are Levites. They are. It's just wrong. Yeah. Yes. So more than likely, they did put it on with poles, picking it up, putting it on the cart, moving the poles out of the way because it's much more efficient to take it on a cart than it is to make some poor guys carry it for all of that distance. It is. Makes good sense. Can happen a lot quicker. But yes, it doesn't end well for Uzzah. What does it also remind us about the ark? You can take a look in verse 6. It tells us something, reminds us, wants us to remember something about the ark. What does it want us to remember? Yes, this is where God is. He dwells between the cherubim. And I think we forget about that in this story. We're not talking about this inanimate box that has nothing going on with it. We're talking about a box where God dwells between the cherubim. And if you go back and you read about the building of the ark, and you read about the moving of the ark, and you read about what it meant for God to dwell between the cherubim, there is something there that shows the glory of God. What it is, I don't know, because it's called the glory of God dwells between the cherubim. So argue amongst yourselves, because I don't know what that means. But something is there. So we're not just talking about this box. I see this a lot with pictures of this event, where they're drawing it out. It's just the ark. There's nothing between the cherubim. No, Chronicles wants us to remember this is the box. This is the ark of God where God dwells between the cherubim. There is something there. So when Uzzah reaches out and touches it, he is literally getting close to God. Whereas they're supposed to use incredibly long poles, and even the congregation is not even supposed to be close to those poles. Yes?
You're saying all that, I guess I've never thought about. It's supposed to be covered.
Mm-hmm.
So
the moving is supposed to be covered, yeah.
Yeah, so I wonder, I never really, till you brought up how did they get it on a cart, I never really thought about. I bet they did everything they were supposed to do. Pick the poles up, pick it up with the poles, cover it with, it was the beaver, I forget exactly what.
Yeah,
some kind of covering that they're supposed to use to cover it with. I bet all that's going on except it's on the cart.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Any other thoughts about the moving of the ark before we get further into the moving of the ark?
Your comment about there's something there, and made me think about all that happens at Mount Sinai during the Exodus. Moses seeing, being before God, coming back, his face shining. And then I always like the scene where God has the people approach the mountain, and he, comes down on the mountain. And after that happens, they tell Moses, we don't need to see him again. You go talk to him, come back, tell us. And, and that's the ark, maybe kind of represents all of that.
Yeah, very true. Yes?
If you go back a little ways, the Philistines surely understood the significance of the ark when they had the ark there, and they go in and they find their God, Dagon, lying in pieces on the floor, broken up. They were quick moving
Yeah.
to get rid of the ark and send it on its way. Nothing else to do with it. So Dagon really wasn't the Lord of gods.
Yes, exactly right. Any other thoughts? I'm not falling down that rabbit hole, but it's a good question. That was, did God make the oxen stumble, if you didn't hear that? And that is a great question for private conversation. Very good. It is exactly something God would do, to set up that scenario to make them be righteous. It is exactly what he would do. Harvey. No, they put it on a cart. That's how it goes away. Is they put, two cows that don't really know what they're doing on a cart that have calves over there and say go away, and but they get rid of it. Yeah. We're not told if the touching of the ark with the Philistines kills any of them. We know that a plague happens, but we're not told that they specifically died. We are told some people do die, but they're not until they get back. It's not until it gets back to Jewish territory that the Jews who misuse it, 70 of them die as a result of it. But we're not told about the Philistines dying from touching it. Yeah.
Do you think David just forgot what the law was? Or did he just decide, I'm going to do this, seems to be a better way to transport this, rather than what? I don't get why he allowed that to happen or promote that to happen or whatever.
That's a great question. The only answer I can give is religion in Israel at this time is spotty at best. They do have the tabernacle that is functioning. They do not bring the ark to the tabernacle. They bring it to Jerusalem and put it in a separate tent. They know things of the law, but not all of the things of the law. Like, who is going to be offering all of the sacrifices in just a minute? It's going to be David. It's not priests. It's David doing it. So there are things they seem to know really well, and it seems that they can find out, because David does it correctly the next time. He corrects all of it. So it does seem like they really investigate and they can correct it. But there does seem to be a disconnect. Yeah. Okay, let's get a little further. So Uzzah reaches out. He touches the ark. He dies as a result of it. What is David's initial reaction? Anger. One, you talk about putting David to shame. Most kings don't respond well to that. Most men don't respond well to that, being pointed out your wrongdoing, especially in such a glaringly obvious way. Anger is the normal response of most people in that situation. But it very quickly turns into what? Fear. So much so that he refuses to move the ark any longer, and he leaves it in the home of Obed-Edom. How long does he leave it there? 3 months. 3 months. Before finally he feels good enough to try again. So probably that's the investigation time period. Why in the world would God do this? Oh, we're supposed to do it this way. And so we're going to get much more details the second time through over there in chapter 15. Any comments, Rachel?
Thinking if they haven't really investigated the law very well recently, they're kind of treating the ark like an idol, because that's how it was treated way back when they lost it. Like, oh, our God needs to come to battle with us. Let's bring this out here. And so what they're doing seems really like a great idea if there's no instructions, because like this is how you would treat something valuable. But if they, that's not what God has instructed, and if they didn't go to figure that out or research that, then they're just treating it however it seems like maybe a holy thing should be treated. And how else would they know except for what other nations do with idols?
Yeah, I think you're right. And we do see a little bit of David's time with the Philistines colored into that, bringing in some of that idolatry thought. Any other thoughts? Yes.
He inquires twice of the Lord regarding the Philistines, but not regarding this.
Picked up on that too, did you? Yes. Very telling. Who does he inquire of? He inquires of his army. Yeah. Okay, let's get into chapter 15. All right, the ark of the Lord then is moved in chapter 15 into the beginning of chapter 16 of 1 Chronicles. So David builds a house for himself. We've got all of that kind of going on in the background going on. Hiram has sent down cedars. That's all happening. But it also tells us while that's happening that he prepares a place for the ark of God. He pitches a tent for it. Interestingly, he does not send it up to where the tabernacle is. Instead, this is where he puts it. I can't remember what chapter that is in. It's later on, like 21 or something. It talks about where the tabernacle is. I don't know. I'll find it for next time. I didn't write that one down, of course. But the tabernacle is still functioning. It's not in Jerusalem. So he builds a separate tent. So again, this is kind of this quasi-faithful Israel, where they do some things right and some things wrong. Uzzah gets killed because of the some things wrong, but they're also still doing other things wrong. It's not going into the Holy of Holies. It is going to a tent, probably following a similar pattern to the tabernacle, but it is not the tabernacle. So we've got this weird hybrid thing going on, and that characterizes pretty well all of Israel. Until they go away into captivity, they're this quasi-mixture of foreign thought, man thought, and God thought, and calling that worship of God. Sometimes they get a little better, sometimes they get a little worse, sometimes they get a lot worse, sometimes they get a lot better. But until they come back from exile is the first time that they really sit down and they say, we will only do what God wants. And then they went beyond that. But they don't go back into idolatry. They go into legalism and Pharisaism and Sadducees, and they start making the sects and their verbal laws that keep them from going against the law of Moses. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. If you're interested in that, talk to the elders, and I can do that next year. Lesson 3. I've only taught 2 of them, and I got a plug. Okay, David assembles everybody together. Verse 3 down there. It tells us, David says, no one but the Levites in verse 2 may carry the ark of God, for God has chosen them to do this. He gathers a lot of people together from verse 4 down through verse 11. We are told who are the Levites that are remaining, how many of them are remaining. We've got the individuals belonging to certain families. We've got Gershom in there. We've got all of the families in there. Kohath is in there. And the individuals who are supposed to be carrying it are now going to be the ones carrying it. He places a lot of importance upon the heads of the fathers' houses of the Levites in verse 12. He instructs them all to consecrate themselves and to be prepared. Down in verse 13, he makes a big deal. He says, you did not carry it the first time, therefore the Lord broke out against us because we did not seek him according to the rule. I find it very interesting the ESV uses the same language, that God breaks out against the Philistines and he breaks out against the Israelites. It's the same language. From God's perspective, he attacked his enemy, and we were the enemy that time. Okay, any comments before we go a little bit further? Then we have the great long list of the singers and what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to be functioning. He commands the chiefs of the Levites to appoint their brothers as singers. The one who is most well known to me is Asaph. He's mentioned there in verse 17. He writes several of the Psalms, so we're going to see him come in quite often when reading through the Psalms. There's a few of the others as well that will appear occasionally in the Psalms, but he's the one that I really remember whenever I think about somebody other than David writing Psalms. He's the one that always comes to mind. They are commanded to play loudly on musical instruments. They are commanded to sing loudly. They are always before the Lord and always doing their singings. Any comments anybody has on that? Okay. There's a verse I remember, but I don't remember where it is. It's in here somewhere, where he talks about what they sing. Maybe it's in the next chapter. Yes, chapter 16 and verse 4. It lists 3 things that these singers are supposed to be singing before the tent of the Ark of God. What are the 3 things they're supposed to sing? Or 3 reasons. You could also say it that way. That's 1. 2. And praise. Invoke, thank, and praise. This is what they're doing. We need God, we thank him for his response, and God is awesome. Those are their songs. That's it. They're not getting off on side tangents. They stay right there all day long There's songs going on, and horns are blowing at regular intervals, making sure that no one in the city of Jerusalem can forget God is here. Any other thoughts before we get a little more details on the moving of the ark?
Obed-Edom, the ark remained at his house, and now he continues in service with the ark.
Yeah, because he's a Levite. He has to keep on functioning, and David is really establishing a real worship inside of Jerusalem. Ultimately, yes, it does appear that the tabernacle moves there. We're not really given a lot of details for it, but ultimately the temple gets there, and real worship is established in Jerusalem. Yes. Okay, 25. We got about 5 minutes. David and the elders of Israel and the commanders of the thousands, they come together to Obed-Edom's home with rejoicing. And because God helped the Levites who were carrying the ark of the covenant of the Lord, they sacrificed 7 bulls and 7 rams. Interesting, because in Samuel, it gives slightly different details. Rather than saying because God is helping them, how many steps do they make it before they start sacrificing? 6. Once they've taken 6 steps, they start sacrificing. It really makes me wonder how far they made it before the oxen stumble. Because if that is all it took before David is totally thrilled and knows that they're doing the right thing, sounds like it stumbled pretty quick, definitely. So yes, he begins his sacrifices there. David clothes himself in a robe of fine linen, according to verse 27. All of the Levites as well were clothed that way. The singers and the leaders of the music of the singers were all that way. David also wore a linen ephod. Slightly different than Samuel as well. It seems as if he's got the 2 garments in Chronicles. In Samuel, it really only talks about the linen ephod and that he's wearing nothing else. Commentators seem divided. Whether this is just describing the ephod, linen robe is a linen ephod, you can decide for yourselves. I kind of take the point that he's wearing both because that matches priesthood better. They wore the underrobe and then the ephod on top, the high priest does, and that seems to be the pattern he's following according to Chronicles, rather than just wearing the ephod, because the ephod wasn't quite a lot of clothing. It's the one that goes on the outside. It really just kind of goes over the shoulders. It has a little attachments on the side, and it stops above their knee, and it's really only there to support the breastplate of the high priest. You want to talk about being naked? Michael's right. He's pretty naked. David's counter to that is different, and I think Chronicles perhaps gives us the better picture of that, is that he is not trying to be naked before God. He is dressing exactly like all of the people who are involved in the moving of the ark. The Levites, the singers, everybody is dressed exactly the same. So one commentator made the point that perhaps what she is objecting to is the putting off of his kingly garments and making himself nothing more than a common person. Whereas she grew up with her father, who would have died before taking off of his kingly garments and making a mockery of himself in the streets.
His kingly garments.
One time,
and they mocked him.
Yeah. Is Saul among the prophets? Yes. So not by voluntariness. Not voluntarily. I caught it. Okay, in verse 29, we get the brief detail here. 2 Samuel gives us much more detail. The ark of the covenant of the Lord came to the city of David. Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David dancing and celebrating, and she despised him in her heart. In Samuel, they get a nice conversation about this. She says in her heart of verse 20, she says to David in verse 20, how can the king of Israel, of chapter 6 of 2 Samuel, how the king of Israel honored himself today, uncovering himself today before the eyes of his servants, female servants, as one of the vulgar fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. And David says it was before the Lord, who chose me above your father, and above all his house, to appoint me as prince over Israel, the people of the Lord. And I will celebrate before the Lord. I will make myself yet more contemptible than this, and I will be abased in your eyes. But by the female servants of whom you have spoken, by them I shall be held in honor. Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children then until the day of her death. So a little bit more detail of the given flow of Michal and David. We really get his perspective here and her perspective as well on what happened. And he's like, look, I'm gonna worship God. And that's just all it is to it. I'm going to worship God. It was before the Lord, and I'm going to do it again. I love that. He's like, I'm going to make myself more contemptible, and I will be more abased. I'm going to do it again, worshiping my God. Another interesting thing is it talks about David dancing before the Lord. There's 5 or 6 different words that are used in the Old Testament for dancing. This one specifically talks about leaping and jumping. So that's the image. So it's some sort of dance that is the leaping, skipping, jumping aspect rather than, say, twirling. They have a different one for spinning. They have another word for going around in circles for the dancing. So that's a little bit different of a perspective. And so a lot of the pictures we do see is of David dancing and leaping while he's dancing during this time. That's a lot of the way it's interpreted when you see it drawn out. Okay, let's get the ending here. We're about out of time, but I haven't heard a buzzer, so I'm going to keep going. In chapter 16 and verse 1 of 1 Chronicles, they bring the ark inside. They offer burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. When David had finished the burnt offerings and peace offerings, he blesses the people. He distributes to them a loaf of bread, a portion of the meat, and a cake of raisins. I would ask the question, but I'll just give you the answer. Where does he get the meat? Where does he get the cake? Where does he get the cake of raisins? This is grain offerings, drink offerings, and a portion of the peace offering. They are all participating in the sacrifices here. So remember, the peace offering is a meal between God, the priest, and the people, or the one doing the offering. Well, David stands in as priest. He eats a portion. The people then have to have a portion, and God gets his portion burned on the altar. 4 down through 7, it tells us David appoints some of the Levites then to minister before them. This is to the invoke, thank, and praise the Lord. We're given a list of who is to do what. Asaph is to sound the cymbals. I like that one. Benaiah and Jehaziel are supposed to blow trumpets regularly. Then on that day, David first appointed that thanksgiving be sung to the Lord by Asaph and his brothers. So from that day forward, during David's reign, you can hear the singing and the music of the worship of God in the city of Jerusalem. All right, we're done there. Lesson 4 next time. So we'll get into a couple of chapters in 2 Samuel, and looks like a couple 3 chapters in 1 Chronicles. So be ready for lesson 4. Thank you.